This is my new PC. Okay, that's kind of a lie. It's not brand new. It's, as people online say, new to me. It has a processor that's clocked at 4.77 megahertz. It's an Intel 8088. It has 64 kilobytes of RAM. As for storage, it has no internal storage. But it does have two 5.25-inch floppy drives, although these are aftermarket. The original ones were full height. There's a plug for a cassette drive, and for graphics, an MDA, which stands for monochrome display adapter. And to power it all, a PSU that's 63.5 watts. This is my PC, an IBM Model 5150, also known as the IBM Personal Computer, originally released August 12th, 1981. Hello everybody who's watching, this is Right Angle Productions, and welcome to the first episode of Tech Tips with Angle. This is my official new name for my tech videos. Yes, the name is meant to be silly and inspired by another tech YouTuber, one with questionable handling of former employees' claims of mistreatment, but anyway. If you're interested in tech videos that don't use nor suck up to generative AI, I hope you enjoy this video and whatever Tech Tips with Angle videos I make in the future. Again, this is an IBM PC, originally released in 1981. Mine is from, at the very newest, March of 1983. I'll explain how I figured that out later. The IBM 5150 is actually a very special computer. It's very significant to computing history. You might already know why, but if not, I'll tell you. First, though, I want to set this thing up and get it running. Alright, so I got this computer from work over the summer. Thank you to my boss for letting me have that. I'm probably sending this video to him, so you know who you are. Also, thank you to my coworkers for showing this to me and enabling my nerdery in getting this thing working. You know who you all are too. But I mentioned work because there was also this Honeywell keyboard with the PC. It unfortunately does not work. I also got two monitors for this thing, which I'll get into in a bit. But the original IBM keyboards, known by IBM documentation as the 83 key keyboard, and known now to some people as the XT variant of the IBM Model F keyboard, go for over $100 on eBay, which is, I don't really want to spend that. So I found this compatible keyboard made by Maxi Switch Co., which costs about $60 including shipping. There are a few other cheaper XT compatible keyboards, which is what you need to have a keyboard that works with IBM 5150. But this was the cheapest one that had basically closest to the original layout with the 10 function keys on the side. And this one also has a badge that says the TM Personal Computer Keyboard. So I think it was a pretty good choice for the IBM Personal Computer. So to get the PC set up, we'll plug in this keyboard, which uses this connector, a 5-pin DIN. It looks kind of like a PS2 connector, but it's actually quite bigger. The PS2 connector wasn't a thing until 1987 with the IBM PS2, short for Personal System 2. The PS2 port is actually kind of 6-pin mini DIN, so you could say that this 5-pin DIN is kind of the PS2 port's dad in both design and function. Anyway, plug in the keyboard, and now the monitor. This is the IBM 5151. This is a monochrome CRT display, which you can use with the MDA card. You could also get a CGA, which stands for Color Graphics Adapter card, with which you will use the IBM 5153 color display. I have both monitors, but my PC has the MDA, I don't have a CGA, so we'll be using the IBM 5151. The monitor plugs into the MDA at the back of the computer with this DE9 connector. This might look familiar because the DE9 connector is what the RS-232 serial port uses. That's kind of the predecessor to USB, basically. But of course, this isn't a serial port. This is just the monitor connector. So again, we'll plug it in here at the back. And finally, we'll plug the power cable into the power supply. The PSU has a C13 connector, which a C14 plug like this plugs into, which is the same standard that we use on desktops today. You might notice the PSU also has a C14 connector, in that the 5151's power cable is a C13 connector at the end of a cable that comes out of it. Well, as the case says right above that C14 connector on the power supply, this lets you plug your monitor's power cable directly in to the computer. So you only need one power cable going to your entire setup. I think this is super neat, and we're not going to be doing that. Whenever I run the PC with the monitor plugged directly into the power supply, the computer will randomly shut off after a few minutes. So I'm just going to plug the monitor in with another power cable. You can do this, the monitor just turns itself on and off with the PC anyway. And I love that even with the ability to plug the monitor directly into the computer, you can still just, get another power cable and plug it in directly to the wall. They're still standard C13 and C14 connectors. Anyway, when I do it like this, the computer doesn't randomly shut off. I believe it's because the power supply isn't what it used to be. You'll see, or rather hear, what I mean in a moment when I turn on the computer. But now that we have everything plugged in, we can turn on the computer. To turn it on, towards the back on the side is this big red power switch. I love this. I love what I can only really describe as substantial power buttons. Like here's a couple others. For example, just the big ones that really click in and feel really good to press. And as you can probably guess, this sounds and feels substantial too. So let's go ahead, turn it on, and see what happens. As you can probably hear, or not, I don't know how well my microphone is going to pick this up. There is a high-pitched noise that the computer makes when it's on. It's coming from the power supply. It works, but it's definitely towards the end of its life. That's why I think the computer can't handle having the monitor's power plugged directly into it. Regardless, if the high-pitched noise does get picked up really well by my microphone, I'm going to do my best to quiet it in editing. Anyway, first I want to mention that this is indeed a monochrome display, green and black. It looks kind of like those cliche hacker or matrix terminals in movies, and that comes from these kinds of displays. So the monitor has contrast and brightness knobs you can adjust. The best way to do it is to have it so it's just a black background with brighter green text. There, I think that looks pretty good. So you boot the computer without putting anything in it, and this is what you get. The IBM Personal Computer Basic version C 1.00, copyright IBM Corp. 1981. This is known as Cassette Basic. It only supports cassettes, so it can't read from or write to floppy disks. I don't have a cassette drive, nor can I find much information on using cassettes with an IBM 5150, but Cassette Basic can still be used to, as you can probably guess, write and run basic programs, like the classic 10 print hello, 20 go to 10. At the bottom of the screen are different commands, each of which corresponds to a function key. In this case, we want to run our program, and 2 is run. So if we go to a new line and hit F2, our program runs. Now, there's 3 ways to stop this program. You can hit a keyboard shortcut that you've probably heard of before, Control-Alt-Delete. This will reboot the computer. The next way is you can simply turn off the computer. Yes, you can do that. This is how computers were back then. It's best to wait 5 seconds before turning it back on, though. I think it's been 5 seconds, so... And then the last and honestly most sensible way is to hit Control Break. This, as the name of the second key implies, breaks the program. Now let's say you want to clear the screen. On the bottom at the very end, 0 is screen. This corresponds to the F10 key. So if I press F10, clears the screen. I don't really know any basic aside from the classic 10 print something, 20 go to 10, so that's all I can really show you here. Say you want to do something more with your PC though, like read and write from floppy disks. For that, we need an operating system. When I listed the specs of this machine, I said it doesn't have any internal storage. So if there's no hard drive or anything, where does the operating system go? On a floppy disk. This is a copy of IBM PC-DOS 2.00 from 1983. I got it on eBay. The seller said they were cleaning out and selling old things from their house, which is how you know it's good. You find the best vintage technology in an old attic or barn or something, or a closet that your coworker pointed you towards. But this isn't just a floppy with DOS on it. It's a whole manual for DOS. In the back of this binder is the 5¼ inch floppy disk with DOS on it, and another floppy disk labeled Supplemental Programs, which we'll get to in a bit. I've actually learned quite a bit on how to use DOS by reading through this thing. It has this GE Quick Rental Instruments sticker on it, so I guess this was previously a copy of DOS that people could rent or something. Maybe this belonged to a employee of GE at one point. I don't know, but I have it now. Also inside the binder was this thing, which tore from the 3 rings, but anyway, it's a quick reference card. So it folds out like a roadmap and just has some commands for quick reference that might be useful when using DOS. To boot into DOS, if the computer is off, simply insert the floppy, and turn on the computer. If the computer is on, insert the floppy and hit Control-Alt-Delete to reboot the computer. From there, it'll reboot into DOS. When you boot into DOS, it asks you to enter a date. Since this is software from 1983, so before the year 2000, you might think it only supports years with 2-digit dates. I mean, that's what the whole Y2K bug/scare was about. But that's not exactly the case here. Let's have a look at what the manual has to say. Here we are, section 2, page 6, telling DOS the date. Here it tells you what to type in when you start DOS and asks you what the date is. If you look over at the next page at number 5, where it tells you what to put in for the year, it reads, type the last 2 numbers of the year between 80 and 99, so 1980 and 1999, or a 4-digit number between 1980 and 2099. So, as of 2025 when I'm recording this, and for the next 75 years, I can enter the current date into this 42-year-old operating system, and it works. Now we're asked for a time. Quite self-explanatory, especially since you can see what it says the current time is. You just put in hour, minute, second, but in 24-hour time, keep that in mind. So right now it's 5:15 p.m., so I'll put 17:15, and I just put 0 for the seconds. And here we are. The IBM Personal Computer DOS version 2.00. Copyright IBM Corp. 1981, 1982, and 1983. So if you know anything about MS-DOS, PC-DOS works like it. We're currently on disk A, so we can type dir. And there's the contents of disk A. To clear the screen, type CLS, and screen's cleared. Before we do anything more with DOS, I want to show you the inside of the PC. You'll see why. When I got this, it had no screws in the back. Normally there are 5 here, 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 and the top middle here. I'll go ahead and start undoing them. Well, that was great. I'll go ahead and start undoing them. There we go. You probably aren't supposed to use these flat top triangle shaped head screws with washers, but these are the only ones I could find that could fit. Even then, as you can see, I couldn't get one to fit in the top middle, so I don't have one there. But I think 4 screws is secure enough, so this works for me. Now to get it open, turn it around. And you just have to slide it forward. It's kind of hard to get perfect. It's been a few months since I've gotten this thing open, so I definitely forgot the magic to get it going, but kind of like flex the sides open. That being said, I don't even know if this is a proper way to open it, but it's how I've gotten it to come open. Okay, this is not playing nice with me on the table. I'm gonna try putting this on the floor and getting it off. Alright, here we are on the floor. Let's see if I have any better luck this time. Okay. I think it's finally budging. There we go. That's definitely not the smoothest way I've gotten off before. Can't wait to see comments that tell me how close I came to breaking this thing. But whatever. It's not broken. And we've got it open. Here we are inside the IBM PC. Starting off, this is the power supply, the thing that is the most showing its age of this system. But the thing I want to point out about it is right here, 63.5 watts. This is kind of crazy to me to see on like a big desktop system in 2025. For example, my desktop has a 750 watt power supply. That being said, before I built it, I put all the parts in PC Part Picker so that way it could show me the wattage estimate. And generally when you're building a computer, it's good practice to get a power supply that does double what you need, because over time power supplies aren't able to produce as much power as one new. And also sometimes components will kind of need to surge the amount they use. If I remember correctly, when the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 30 series came out, there was a big thing about needing like 1,000 watt PSUs for the really high-end ones because they would sometimes surge, need a bunch of power. But that leads me to my point with this thing, which is how power-hungry modern desktop parts have become. I genuinely think this is something I've told like friends and coworkers before. If for just a few generations, Intel, NVIDIA, AMD, all of them would, instead of chasing higher performance numbers, chase higher efficiency numbers with the same performance. Because we already have really good performing hardware these days, but the amount of power that we need for it, I think, is quite unnecessary. The fact that this standard computer had a power supply of just 63.5 watts tells me that maybe we should strive for really good performing hardware that doesn't need 1,000 watt power supplies. And yeah, we do have, say, modern laptops and mini PCs that have really good performance and are really efficient. But my point still stands for the big, fat desktop components and the systems themselves. Anyway, that tangent aside, maybe I need to make future Tech Tips with Engel videos where I just criticize the entire tech industry. Actually, I do have one of those planned. Anyway, next thing is the motherboard. This is the 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard. So according to the website -0degrees.net, which by the way is a great resource for the IBM 5150 and other later IBM PC variants. Reading through there is how I've learned a ton about this system and figure out some other things, but specifically what it tells me off the motherboards is that earlier IBM 5150s had the 16 to 64 kilobyte version like this. Later ones had the 64 to 256 kilobyte version of the motherboard. The main difference between the two is the amount of RAM they support. That's what the names mean. The ones that came with the 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard had the first two BIOS versions. You can tell which BIOS version an IBM 5150 has by looking at this chip down here in socket U33. Let me take out this card. Need to find a screwdriver. I should have just brought my whole screwdriver bit set with me. That would have been a more prepared decision. Alright. You're probably looking at B-roll that I have with a close-up of this chip, but for the sake of me being able to see it while I'm recording right now, this chip right here in socket U33. The first version is the April 24th, 1981 BIOS, which on the chip itself will say part number 570051. Next is the October 19th, 1981 BIOS, which has 57000671. Then the August 16th, 1982 BIOS, which has 5000024. And then finally the October 27th, 1982 BIOS, which has 1501476. As you can see right there, mine says 1501476. So my PC has the chip for the October 27th, 1982 BIOS. But how can that be? It's a 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard, and those only had the first two BIOS versions. Well, IBM actually offered a BIOS upgrade kit. You got the chip for a new BIOS, the thing to take out the old one and put the new one in, and you could update your 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard version of the IBM 5150 with the latest BIOS version. So at some point in the past, that's what happened to this computer. And that's actually how I came to my best estimate for this thing's age, since it has the 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard, and therefore would have had a BIOS version older than the October 27th, 1982 one. I think it's safe to say that at the very newest, this computer is from October 27th, 1982, meaning as I'm recording this is a 43-year-old computer. So again, thank you, -0degrees.net, for providing the information to help me figure that out. Wait just a second. While doing some research about memory expansion for the 5150, I came across this magazine article for some form of expanding the memory in a 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard 5150 to more than that, but not a card. I didn't read through it as much as I should, but regardless, in that magazine, it mentioned that the first IBM 5150s, the ones with the 16 to 64 kilobyte motherboard, were made until March of 1983. Meaning my PC is not at the newest from October of 1982, but from March of 1983. Still, pretty dang old computer. Moving on, the RAM, and I'm going to take out this card too, so that it's visible. Alright, so in these 4 banks right here are the RAM chips. All 4 of them are filled, which is actually necessary due to a bug with the October 27, 1982 BIOS, where basically if you don't have them all filled, the computer will miscalculate the amount of RAM you have. Regardless, between these 4 is a total of 64 kilobytes of RAM, which is the maximum this motherboard supports. It's actually possible to add more RAM through an expansion card, which I would like to get at some point, as well as a CGA card for no particular reason. Speaking of expansion cards, here are the... Oh, right. Here are the 2 that the IBM PC comes with. This is the floppy controller. The ribbon cable for the 2 floppies just plugs in at the back here. And this is the monochrome display adapter, the MDA. As you've already seen, this port is what the monitor connects to, and this right here is actually the port for your printer. These right here are the 2 5¼ inch floppy drives. These are aftermarket, as I've said. The original ones were full height. These drives are made by Toshiba, which I actually think is pretty interesting because my laptop's a Toshiba. The second drive is missing the latch as well as the spacer above it. It does work though. When you twist the latch on the first one, the cam moves down on this thing which pushes the drive head down. And so if I put a floppy in and twist the cam down into the right position myself, get it straight like that, it actually works. And of course, with the first one, when you open the latch again, cam comes out, and if I do it myself, pops the floppy out. So it's actually kind of a good thing that the second spacer is missing, because I can just reach my fingers in and get at the cam. It's a lot easier with the case open, like I'm demonstrating right now, but I am capable of doing it with just through the slot. That probably looks and sounds really suggestive. Okay. Down here, it's hidden from the camera right now, but there are these 2 sets of tiny switches, SW1 and SW2. So today you have your BIOS settings. On most computers, you can get there by spamming the F2 key when you start your computer, and you have a menu to choose all that stuff. Here, you don't have that. You have switches. These are each sets of 8, so a total of 16 switches that can either be on or off, and all of them mean something. When I first found this computer, it wouldn't boot up, and once again, thanks to -0degrees.net, which also has some pretty good troubleshooting pages as well. I'll look through those as well as their documentation on all the switches mean, and it turns out I had some set incorrectly. Well, I say this is my first time using this computer. I didn't set these switches in anyway. Regardless, I was able to set them to the correct things, and then the computer finally booted. We also have, a part I keep forgetting, a speaker. This is a small permanent magnet 2¼ inch speaker. I don't know enough about speakers to know much of what all of that means, but I leave it unplugged, and here's why. So the power supply makes that horrible high-pitched noise, and when the speaker is plugged in, for starters, it makes those beeps, and also it only amplifies the power supply noise. So I leave it unplugged. And now the final thing I want to point out, this right here, this is the CPU, the Intel 8088. It's 16-bit, it's clocked at 4.77 megahertz. It's a variant of the Intel 8086. The only real difference is that the 8088 has an 8-bit external data bus as opposed to the 8086's 16-bit one. And the really interesting thing about the 8088 is that it, along with 8086, are a common ancestor of nearly all modern desktop and laptop CPUs, not including the Snapdragon or Apple Silicon computers. After the Intel 8086 and 8088 came the 80186, and also an 80188, then the 80286, then the i386, which brought 32-bit, then the 486, and the 586, which you might know better as the Pentium, and so on. The modern x86 instruction set architecture, or ISA, which is the architecture that a computer's processor is built upon, started with the 8086 and 8088. That's what the name x86 comes from. The 8086, the 186, 286, 386, all of those in 86, and so the architecture is called x86. In fact, the IBM 5150 is actually the common ancestor to all modern desktops and laptops. When I call it the IBM PC, stress on the, it's because this is the original PC. This is where the term personal computer comes from. I should specify though that I'm calling it the original PC because it was the first to really market itself as a personal computer and it was what popularized the term. But there are earlier microcomputers that fit today's common definition of a personal computer, such as the Apple II, Commodore PET 2001, and Tandy TRS-80, all of which came out in 1977, or an example of a really early one, the DataPoint 2200, which came out in 1970. I actually have a future video planned about DataPoint. Back to the IBM, not long after it came out, other companies started making computers that functioned the same as and were compatible with the same hardware and software as the IBM 5150. These were called IBM PC clones and IBM PC compatibles. From there, PC clones started having their own features and improvements that the IBM PC and other PC clones didn't, to the point that the PC clone market evolved into what is now just the PC market. So I think it's fair to say that the IBM 5150 is the LUCA, which stands for Least Universal Common Ancestor, of all the PCs we have today. Remember when I said IBM PC-DOS works like MS-DOS? Well, that's because PC-DOS is MS-DOS. Microsoft developed, asterisk after developed, there's some other history there that I'm not going to get into right now, DOS for the IBM 5150. From there, Microsoft licensed DOS to other companies for their computers, IBM PC compatibles included. PC-DOS and MS-DOS were the same until version 6 in 1993 when they diverged. DOS was eventually succeeded by Windows, still based on DOS, and then Windows NT, which we still have today in the form of Windows 11. Where did we go wrong? That's what makes this computer so special and significant to computing history. That's also everything I have to show you inside this computer. So, oh wait, I almost forgot. Notice anything about the Intel 8088 in this? You might recognize that to be the AMD logo, Advanced Micro Devices. Intel's main competitor and seemingly the only other company actively making x86 CPUs? Yes, that's right. That leads to the question, how did AMD get the license to make x86 CPUs? Intel was the only manufacturer of their own chips from the 386 until just about a year ago, when they started offloading some production to TSMC for Lunar Lake. However, for the 8086 and 8088, Intel had a number of second sources who manufactured their chips. One of these was AMD. After Intel stopped using second sources for their processors, these companies still held licenses to the x86 ISA. AMD created the AM386, their own competing x86 processor, then the AM486, AMD 5 K86, the K5, K6, and so on, and now my desktop has an AMD Ryzen in it. Anyway, that's how AMD came to be Intel's competitor in the x86 CPU space, and why this Intel chip has an AMD logo on it. It's even more computing history that this thing holds. Now that you know the significance of the IBM PC, let's get back to using it and see more of the command line operating system that precedes modern day Windows. You might be wondering why I'm in the middle of nowhere with the IBM PC. Well, the thing is, like I said, this thing's power supply only takes 63.5 watts. So theoretically, I can run it out of the back of my car. I thought. Turns out, no, I can't. So the AC inverter in my car does up to 125 watts, and I assumed, okay, this plus whatever the monitor draws would be enough for it to handle, and I tried turning it on and it didn't work. So my idea for a scene of me just using DOS in the middle of nowhere powered off my car did not work out. So instead I have a really long extension cable. Anyway, let me show you how to use IBM DOS 2.0. Like I've already shown you, you can just type dir to see what's on the disk. And when I do that, you might notice this right here, basic.com. Whenever you start a computer without DOS in it is how you get cassette basic. The thing is, DOS has its own built-in basic that you simply run by doing basic.com. And here we are. The IBM Personal Computer Basic version D 2.00, copyright IBM Corp. 1981, 1982, 1983. You also notice that we have less bytes free. This is the amount of RAM. Whenever we just use cassette basic, it had 60,000 something because it has 64 kilobytes of RAM. Now only 26,000 because DOS is also loaded in. Anyway, the difference between DOS's built-in BASIC and cassette BASIC is that DOS BASIC can actually read and run BASIC programs from a floppy disk. So, I need to get something for my car. So, here is a 5¼ inch floppy. This doesn't have any software on it, at least it didn't come that way. This is just a used floppy that I got off of eBay. You can still get things surprisingly. Real quick, we're gonna reboot the computer again because I don't actually know how to get out of BASIC and back into DOS. There's probably a proper way to, but we're just gonna reboot. And now that we've rebooted, put in the floppy to drive B. I have to take off my gloves for this. Yes, the day I happened to decide to record this bit happened to be the day that it snowed, making it work. Anyway, like I've already showed you, it doesn't have a latch, but I can put it in and then adjust the cam so that way the drive head is down. And now let's go to drive B. Here we go. So originally we were on drive A, which is what DOS is on. Now we're on drive B. So if I type dir, we have the files to put on it. Back in the day, people would actually get games and software from magazines and type them into the computer themselves. I decided to do that here because I don't have a very good way to read and write from a 5¼ inch floppy from a new computer. I have an idea as to how I can do that, but that requires me to do another project in the future. So I thought I'd pay homage to that old way of getting software and just type it myself, because I didn't really have any other way. So I found one of those games, a pinball game, on archive.org, and just entered it in myself. So do CD for change directory, B, pinball. Now do dir, and now we're in pinball. So classic.basic is the pinball program. Now let's load with basic. We're gonna have to go back to drive A. I know this is a bit tedious. And do basic.com. And now we need to load it. So again, each of the commands on the bottom correspond to a function key. So I press F3 for load, type in the path, and then put in a quotation mark to end out the one at the beginning, press enter, and it has loaded the pinball game. So now, press F2 for run, and here we are, pinball. So it says, welcome to pinball. Would you like instructions to this fantastic game? I type yes. It just gives you some rules. Press enter to continue. Then it starts the game. And crashes. So, as was a common issue with hand typing in programs yourself from some other piece of media, pretty easy to make mistakes. You run your program, get an error, have to go back and look for the error. I've done that at least 10 times and it's still not working. I was considering just not showing this segment in the video anyway, but just as an example of running a program on here. This is that. Anyway, I'm going to reboot again to show you another part of DOS that is not a basic program, and that is the line editor. So if I do dir, you'll see right here is this program called Edlin. Edlin is, like I said, the line editor. It's basically the text editor, like Notepad for DOS. So to open Edlin, we can just type, of course, Edlin, and then the file we want to edit. So let's create something on my B floppy. Call it something.txt. And here we are, new file. We're now editing something.txt. So the quick reference card has a section about Edlin. Someone even wrote saves next to E, which is what it does. That's correct. It ends edit and then saves it. So say you're like me and you haven't actually used DOS and line editor on this computer in a few months and you forgot some of the commands. Well, from here I can see that in order to insert a line, you type line number and then I, or you can just type I. So to start inserting lines, we type I. Here we are, line 1. So this is something. This is another line of something. Isn't it something. And there we go, we've typed a text file. So now that we're done, we can go ahead and end edit. So for that, you just press E. But pressing E just types E. That doesn't do anything. So to get out of typing, what you do is hit Control Break, kind of like how you'd break a program. And now we can type E. There we go, it saved something and ended. So now let's say we want to view what we wrote in something about text. So we'll do Edlin, something, text again. And there we go, it's loaded the file. It says end of input file, but it hasn't shown any of the actual lines. So if we look at a quick reference card again, right here, it says you can type L to list the lines. You type a start line and an end line. Although if you just type L without any numbers, there you go, it shows what you typed. This is something. This is another line of something. Isn't it something? That's a very basic overview of Edlin that I'm going to end now by pressing Q to quit. And now we're going to move on and have a look at this. Like I said earlier, the supplemental programs floppy came with the DOS floppy in the back of the binder, and it just has supplemental programs on it. So I'm going to take out the other floppy, put in the supplemental programs one, and let's see what's on it. So go to drive B, dir, and we have a bunch of, as the name suggests, supplemental programs. So a number of these actually will not run on here. Alright, so I was about to record a little segment here where I show you in the manual how not all of the programs on the supplemental programs floppy support the MDA. For some you need a CGA and a color monitor, but I can't find it. I swear I remember reading in this manual, or at least somewhere, that there was a table that showed all of those basic programs and which ones required a color display and which ones you can do with a monochrome display, but it's not in here. I even looked up a scan of this manual that had OCR done on it to Control F to try and look for it, and instead found a thing that said information about the supplemental programs can be found in the IBM Basic Manual. So I found one of those, and there is not any information about supplemental programs in there. I tried finding other websites to see if I could find what I swear I saw, that table with information about the supplemental programs, and could not find it. But at the very least, the point I wanted to make with this little scene is that not all of the supplemental programs are compatible with a monochrome display. So I'm about to show you a few of them that you can run, including, funny enough, color bar. Funny enough though, take a note of colorbar.basic, go back to drive A and load basic again, and load color bar. We get to see all the amazing colors that the monochrome 5150 display can display. So, IBM Personal Computer, color bar, version 1.10. Press space or continue. So here we are. We have black, blue, green, cyan, red, magenta, brown, white, dark gray, dark blue, light green, light cyan, light red, light magenta, yellow, and int white. So colorful, isn't it? Now we'll get out of this, says press escape key to exit. And we're actually going to turn off the computer now, because the next part I want to show you requires the speaker, which, as I've said, has been unplugged.
There we go.
Thank you.
No problem.
Alright, speaker's plugged in, let's turn this back on. There's the horrible noise of the speaker. And we're back in DOS. So let's have a look at what's on drive B again. And right here we have music.basic. So let's load basic again. Load music.bas. Run. And here we are, music version 1.10. Press spacebar to continue. So we can play March, Stars, 40, Hat, Humor, Bug, Pop, Dandy, Sakura, Blue, Scales. Let's go ahead and start with March. There you go, that's what this speaker can do. Let's also do stars. And we'll do one more. Let's try Dandy. And actually I lied, I'm gonna do the last one, scales, because I'm pretty certain that's just... And there we go, that's what you can do with the speaker. There were other ways to get sound out of your PC than just the built-in speaker. Later on came sound cards. IBM introduced their own sound card called the IBM Music Feature Card, which came out in 1987. And later on came the Sound Blaster series of sound cards by Creative. I'll admit I haven't done too much research into sound cards for the IBM PC and all of that, but what I can tell you is that a Sound Blaster allows you to do things like this with your IBM PC. Yes, that is Bad Apple playing on an IBM PC, or rather an IBM PC XT. That was done on an IBM 5160, which is basically an update to the 5150 that IBM released. It still has an 8088 and all, so you get my point. Anyway, as you can probably tell, it's gotten dark out. I'm cold. That's enough for you with this computer in the middle of nowhere. And that's everything I have to say about the IBM 5150. I'm so excited to now have a computer that's actually from the pre-GUI days, especially the one that led to all the personal computers we have now. There's a lot I still don't know about this thing. I don't want to come off as a complete expert about this, so much as just sharing what I find interesting about this computer as I learn it, and I hope to make more videos about it in the future when I get more things with it, figure out how to do more, and yeah. And I can't wait to share more Tech Tips with Engel videos in the future. I already have a few in the works. But that's all for this video. Thank you for watching Right Angle Productions. Bye! Maybe I should just use this computer instead. Who needs modern technology in gaming when I can just use MS-DOS and an 8088? Yeah, I think I'll do that.